Hi,
No worries.
Matija.
It
A
happens
very
all the
warm,
time.
yeah, a very warm welcome to you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for taking out your time to have this conversation with us, with Goodera today for our campaign on International Transgender Day of Visibility. It is our honor to have you and your nonprofit with us today. So, before going into the main interview, I would like to know briefly about you, what you are doing, how are you, where you are staying, and also about your nonprofit. The one thing that I'm really curious to know is the name of your nonprofit. So, please go ahead.
The name of my nonprofit,
Yes,
right?
yes, it is very interesting.
Hi, I'm Matija. I work for an LGBT plus organization, Dasezna, from Serbia. And I do mainly social media and finances there. So what can I say about Dasezna? Dasezna is the largest LGBT organization in Serbia, and main activities that Dasezna does are offering psychological and legal support to LGBT people, especially LGBT people who suffered violence. Also, what Dasezna does is monitoring violence and incidents of hate crime against LGBT plus people, and it is actually the only one in Serbia that does so. So that's briefly about me and about my work in Dasezna and about Dasezna itself.
Great, great. I wanted to know the meaning of the name, the Sesna.
Oh, it means how should I translate? It's very difficult to try. It's like let it be known,
Okay.
and so it's sort of it's like a statement that it sort of describes what we want. We want visibility, and we want it to be known.
Basically, it's like a voice.
Yeah.
Okay, great. It was really amazing to know about you and your nonprofit. So, with that, I would like to start with my first question. This is 2022, and we see many people are embracing themselves, their identity. The transgender community is growing so beautifully. So that brings to my first question: why do you think is the need of the hour, the concept of transgender visibility?
So I think visibility itself is of huge importance. However, I think it's very important to keep in mind that not every visibility is a good visibility. So I feel like it is also important to have a specific kind of visibility that will, on one hand, sort of represent trans people as just people who deserve to be seen as people with rights, needs, and everything else. And on the other hand, which I think is in one way even more important, is to send a message to other trans people that there is a community and that there is a place of to be connected with, and a place where you can feel safe and where you can find support. So I think that's very important. And for example, speaking of a situation in Serbia, I think trans community is not connected enough. So I think visibility is very important, especially when it comes to connecting the trans community and empowering the community. Also, I feel like, LGBT plus movement has been there for like decades. However, it was always led by, gays and lesbians, and there was not much space for trans people. Pretty much nowhere in the media. It was only recently that trans people have gotten a space for ourselves to be seen and to present ourselves. And I feel like that's a first step towards other people, towards general public understanding of like trans people and the issue of transgender. So I feel like visibility is, a key and of huge importance for working on trans rights in general.
Yes, I too feel that that's actually the need of the hour. It is very stressful, to hide your gender identity, to, just because the society doesn't conform to it. Anyway, we are full with so much stresses from our life, so much work. But if you can't even be yourself, that is something we just can't imagine. So
Yeah.
that brings to my next question. How is a non-profit working for this cause to remove this stress from the trans people?
Well, what Dasezna does, as I've said, Dasezna offers legal and psychological support to members of the LGBT community. And since trans people, at least in Serbia, are often the least empowered and the most vulnerable, so offering legal and psychological support to trans people is very important. And also, there's another thing. Dasezna offers a safe space for trans people within the LGBT plus community, because there is actually some organizations led by gays and lesbians that don't really offer safe space to trans people. So there's a whole movement, I don't know how familiar you are, but it's called TERF. So it's short from Trans Exclusive Radical Feminists. I mean, they're so-called feminists, honestly. There's nothing feminist about like excluding trans people or attacking any other minority. But yeah, this movement is very strong in Serbia. So there's lesbian and gay people who exclude trans people. Not just that, but like invalidate their identities and the whole concept of gender identity. And this movement is pretty strong in Serbia. So offer being sort of an organization that has been existing for years and that sort of is important in local LGBT community, such as Dasezna, and offering a safe space and being 100% pro-transgender and pro-trans rights and accepting of trans people. I think that's also very important. Also, Dasezna creates like safe spaces for trans people, which is very important since trans people don't really have that many safe spaces in Serbia, and the trans community is very, it's not very connected. So offering a space for the community to meet each other, to connect is actually very important. So
Great. As you said, you are trying to create a safe space for the trans people. So
yeah.
Can you just use this platform to enlighten us about about some myths, or can you clear us, like, is there any lack of support and understanding from colleagues in a workplace towards, like, how are they treated? Are treated equally, or what are the problems they are facing in a workplace?
Yeah, well, I cannot speak from my own perspective because I've been only working in LGBT organizations so far. So obviously there's been understanding and support, but the reality of living in Serbia is often very different. I know a lot of trans people who choose not to even be open about their identity. They just, they transition and they just go stealth. They just don't ever speak of their gender identity. They sort of fit in and don't really discuss it. And a lot of their colleagues don't even know that they're trans. So they do it for a variety of reasons, for safety reasons, and also some people just want to be seen as just, everybody else, and to avoid being asked some invasive questions and stuff. So it comes from from on one hand, it's just avoiding some uncomfortable situations, and then again there's people who really are in no position to come out as trans because they would be discriminated against. And also people who are out as trans often suffer variety of different kinds of discrimination. So yeah, I feel like when we leave our our community and safe spaces and we go into the real life, for example in workplaces and such, that's when we see how uneducated our society is, and people are either asking inappropriate questions or being openly aggressive and not welcoming towards trans people. So So I've heard a lot of different experiences, and some of them are not very good. So a lot of people choose not to even be out as trans, and that's, as you've said at the beginning, it is very stressful and unpleasant to hide your identity. So
I see that there is still a fear, there is still a stigma going on that is,
yeah,
that is making the trans people, hide their identity. So, but
yeah,
there are also people in the community who are welcoming towards them.
that's
So,
right.
can you tell me how can people like us, like me, can do to include more trans people in their community? Because I think to be an ally to a trans people, it is an ongoing process, but the steps that needs to be taken are quite simple and very easy. Can you shed some light on it?
Yeah, well, obviously there is people from within the community that are welcoming. There are people outside of the community that are open and welcoming and ready to learn and are educated on trans issues. So it's not always, trans people do not always come across some sorts of discrimination. So yeah, there is people who are actually understanding the issues of trans people and who want to include trans people in the community and who want to be respectful and validate trans people, which is the least people can do, but the bar is low sometimes. So I think it is the most important thing is to be respectful, and if you respect another person just as a person, which again is a bare minimum, but sometimes it's a lot to ask, everything else will sort of will find a way to manage other issues. Like even though somebody maybe doesn't understand how the concept of being trans, if they're respectful to me, I will understand they're respectful and I will find a way to like communicate with this person. So I think that's the first step. Just don't come from a bad place and don't be mean towards other people. I know it sounds dumb, but like it really is that simple. So there is a few things really, like respect other people's pronouns. Even if you know that a person is trans, and their identity, just respect it. Just respect people's pronouns, validate their gender identity. Ask if you don't know, just ask, but take care of how you ask, because sometimes people are like, but I'm just asking, I want to be educated, and then they ask some invasive questions that really nobody feels comfortable answering. So before you ask, just wait for a minute and think about it. If like what you're asking is maybe inappropriate, and for example, if somebody asks a trans person about like their genitals, like think about, will you be comfortable talking about your genitals to like somebody that you barely know? Probably not, and many people are not, and that's not something that we ask a random person. But people sometimes feel that like trans people exist to satisfy their curiosity, and then they get mad if you refuse to answer questions. So just respect the boundaries, and if you do or say something wrong, just be ready to learn and don't get offended, because probably you don't know enough and there is a reason why this person got offended. So but yeah, I mean, if you're respectful, I think all of those things just come on their own. So yeah,
that's exactly what I feel as well. Respect is something irrespective of gender, irrespective of age, irrespective of caste. Everyone should respect every people. Everyone should treat every people as one individual.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a sort of we heard it so many times that it doesn't like, just be nice to respect everyone. But like, why don't we do that? It's that simple. It's just, that's all you have to do. Just be respectful to other people. That's not so difficult. And yet,
yes. So I would like to know, like, how can people like us, there are some people who wants to work for this community, to educate other people, to work for this cause. And with this pandemic, we can see there are lots of hurdles that everyone is facing. So now I'm here at India, you are there at Serbia, so but still we want to work for this cause. So can you tell me how can we people like us can work for this cause?
Well, I think this question is sort of very related to the last one. So everything I said for the last question works for this one as well. But also, I think I would add that sometimes it is not enough for just you to be respectful. Because, for example, it happened a lot of times that like I meet somebody who's like personally respectful and fine with my identity and me being trans, but then, for example, this person is dating a person who's openly transphobic. Like, first of all, that's, don't be a hypocrite, and then just it's not enough, in my opinion. It's not, if you want to work for the cause, it's not enough to just don't do wrong yourself. I think it's also important to educate your environment and sort of don't tolerate transphobia in your surroundings, and don't tolerate people who are openly transphobic. So if we create a climate in society where being transphobic is not socially acceptable, I think that's a huge step. Because like 15 years ago, it was completely normal to like hear homophobic jokes or transphobic jokes on national television. Nowadays, it's not anymore, and that's a huge step. And then you have transphobic and homophobic people who get offended for not being allowed to be openly and publicly homophobic, and that's what we want. I mean, and then they're like, you can't even say anything nowadays. But like, yeah, you can't and you shouldn't. You need to take care of what you're saying, and you're not allowed to say anything, to say everything you want. Because like, people are sometimes like, but that's my freedom of speech. I mean, it's not really your freedom of speech to hurt other people. It would be as if freedom of moving would be if I go out on the street and start pushing people and kicking them with my feet. Is that freedom of movement? It's not really. Like, your freedom of speech ends when you start hurting other people. So, there is a limit and a boundary, and I feel like it is very important to, as a society, work towards understanding that you're not allowed to discriminate against people, and you're not allowed to purposely hurt people. And I think that's when we achieve that, and I think we are in a way working on it, but I think when we manage that as a society, I think that will be a huge step forward towards progress when it comes to trans rights and acceptance of trans people.
This is a very, this is a very strong thing, that I think every trans people are very strong. God has made them extra strong to bear all this trauma, bear all these things from the people, from the community. So, but I feel people like me, people like us, are there, for the trans people, for the trans community, working for them. And I hope one day the entire society will be like that too. So lastly, I would like to ask you, for the volunteers, what message do you want to give to the volunteers who want to work hard, and their action might change the way society can see trans people? So what message do you want to give to the volunteers out there?
We need you. So we can fight all we want for our rights, but if there is no people outside of the community who will be our allies, there is nothing we can do. Because the point is, because we have a community because we're discriminated against, and because we're sort of marginalized in a society. But the point is that one day we don't need a community anymore, and for that we need people outside of the community who are allies, and people like you who want to work for the cause. You get nothing out of it, and that's so noble that you want to work for a community. You don't really have to, because, for example, I have to fight for trans rights because it's about me, and it's very selfish what I do. I need those rights, and I'm fighting among the rest for myself. But if people outside of community want to contribute to that cause, that's just so noble and beautiful, and we're eternally thankful to you. So that would be my message.